Huh? Okay, I can do that too.
Good evening. Welcome to our February meeting. The first item on the agenda is the welcome, the prayer, and the pledge. Ms. Leventis Wells, you want to introduce for the pledge?
It's my honor to have Gabrielle Kane from Mitchell Road Elementary School. She's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, but let me just tell you a little bit about Gabrielle. She's an honor roll student. One of her favorite hobbies is reading, and she participates in Mitchell Road's Battle of the Book Clubs. Gabrielle's mother tells us she hopes to be, and guess what? Gabrielle wants to be a financial planner. So we could use one of those here at the district, don't you think, Doctor?
Sure.
Dr. Royster says, absolutely. So she's moving to Dallas, Texas when she graduates from elementary school. And when you finish college, you look up Dr. Royster because he's going to put you to work, okay? And we are so excited. And Gabrielle, after we do the prayer, then I'll meet you over there and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Stiles, you want to say the prayer?
May we pray. Gracious God, we thank you for your presence in our midst this evening, for the gift of life, the beauty of your creation, and for the great mystery of your love. As the dark days of winter slowly pass and we witness the wonder of life emerging from the earth once again, our hearts are renewed with joy and hope for the future. Just as you bring forth a new season in nature, we pray you will awaken a new season in our hearts and minds. Free us from sickness, suffering, and the great losses we have endured from COVID. Restore our hearts, bodies, and minds for thy service, and restore our hope for a brighter future. Help us as board members to remain mindful of those we serve and to lead with passion and joy. We ask these things in your holy name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Will you get a picture of us?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Meek.
Thank you, Ms. Leventis Wells. There's a couple of folks in the audience.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Meek. I had the pleasure of meeting some students at Anderson College who are here tonight. They're sitting in on a board meeting, and they have to report back. Also, I think a teacher that's here that's taking the principal or something online from the University of South Carolina, and I know, not Clemson, I'm sorry, Dr. Royster, but University of South Carolina. And then we just have a lot of parents and everyone here that wants just to see how a board meeting goes. So thank you.
Thank you. Will the students from Anderson College please stand up? Welcome you all.
The girl from the troop. We also have a young lady that's homeschooled that is in the Scouts, and will you stand?
There you go.
What troop are you with? There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you, Mr. Meek.
Thank you. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is adoption of the consent calendar. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
That's a motion. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Dr. Royster, you have some introductions?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Meek. We want to take this opportunity to introduce our newly appointed principals. It's particularly a privilege to be able to recognize these individuals that are assuming the principalship for the first time, as well as to welcome some experienced principals into the district. First to be introduced, Cameron Bryce, who is becoming the principal at A.J. Wittenberg Elementary, currently serves there as the program director, but has served during the course of this year as the acting principal. Cameron, I believe you have your family with you as well. Just them to stand. Congratulations. We look forward to your leadership at A.J. Wittenberg. Our next introduction, Greg Cook. Greg currently serves as assistant principal at Bryson Middle School. He is being appointed as the director of Inter Career Center. Greg, welcome to your new role and responsibilities. A return to your origins in education as you started out in career and technical. Congratulations, and I believe you have your family with you as well.
Yes, I have my wife Julie, I have my two daughters in high school, Greg Cook, and my middle schooler, Anna.
Our next introduction, Cassandra Davis, who is being appointed as the principal at Chandler Creek, and she's coming to us from Spartanburg District 2, where she serves as principal at Mayo Elementary School. Congratulations, welcome to the district. And do you have someone with you as well? Very good. Our next introduction, currently serving as an assistant principal at J.L. Mann, the new principal at J.L. Mann, Dr. Shannon Gibson. Dr. Gibson, congratulations. Do you have anyone with you as well? Congratulations on your new appointment. We look forward to having you in that role. Next, Jennifer Holman, who currently is serving as the assistant at Augusta Circle and being appointed as the principal at Mitchell Road Elementary School. Jennifer, welcome to that new role and congratulations. We look forward to you serving there. Do you have some family with you tonight? Oh, well, very good. Congratulations again and welcome to each of you. Our next appointment also is a Career Center Director, Michelle Michael, currently the Assistant Director at Golden Strip, but moving into the leadership role of Director at Golden Strip Career Center. Michelle, congratulations. I think you may have family with you as well.
Our son is 3, would not have said that.
Well, we're glad he could be with us tonight too. Congratulations. And our last introduction, currently serving as the assistant principal at Brook Glen, Jordan O'Toole, who will be the newly appointed principal at Brook Glen. Jordan, congratulations, your new appointment. And I believe you have your husband with you as well.
Yep, I have my husband here.
Welcome to him. Thank you, Mr. Meek. We look forward to each of these individuals assuming their new leadership role and moving those programs in those schools, continuing to move them forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Dr.
Royster.
Mr. Meek, can I
Yes.
say something? There are great people that come out of Cherrydale Elementary School. We have 2 that are becoming principals, Cameron Bryce at A.J. Wittenberg and Jordan O'Toole at Brook Glen. So great things come out of Cherrydale. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we go ahead with the meeting with any of the folks that Dr. Royster introduced, want to go ahead and leave, you can do that, or you can stay for the rest of the meeting.
None have chosen the option of staying for the rest of the week.
That was pretty good.
Next item on the agenda is the appearance of visitors. We have 7 speakers tonight. Dr. Stiles, would you read the rules before we get started?
As each speaker's name is called, he or she should proceed to the podium at the end of the board dais, where there is a microphone and a light system. Each speaker has up to 3 minutes to speak to the board. The light system will be green for the first 2 minutes and will turn yellow when 1 minute remains on the speaker's allotted time. In keeping with Board Policy KCA, abusive language or personal attacks aimed at students or staff members will not be permitted. All speakers are expected to behave in an orderly and respectful manner. The board will not engage in discussion with the speaker or respond to comments. The superintendent will designate a member of the staff to respond to each speaker in an appropriate and timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. Each speaker has 3 minutes. First speaker is Sasha Patton.
Members of the board, hello and good evening. My name is Sasha Patton. I'm the mother of a 2nd grader and a future kindergartner. I've spent 14 years teaching in public schools and hold a master's degree in education. I'm here to start a conversation and create some momentum. I'm here to advocate for a child's biological need to move and play outdoors every day. And the best news is creating space in the school day for more unstructured outdoor time is free. As a district, we are actively choosing to limit the movement of our children. By doing this, we are creating a dangerously unhealthy learning environment for them. The lack of outdoor free play is causing long-term damage to the physical, mental, and emotional health of our kids. I'm here to insist that we begin to take steps in a healthier direction. Our goal should be to replicate the successful efforts of others. For example, Dr. Jim Chadwell is a school superintendent in Fort Worth, Texas, where they made national news after changing their school schedules and now give elementary students 4 15-minute recesses every day. Dr. Chadwell says, quote, recess or unstructured play is not just free time, it's intentional free time and has a direct impact on critical thinking, end quote. He's right. Without these breaks to reset, their academic success plummets and their innate love of learning dies. Our modern world is creating less active children. The need for active movement is greater than ever. We have the excellent opportunity to watch our students flourish by simply adding more recess to the school day. Due to lack of movement, our kids are suffering physically, mentally, and falling behind academically. Angela Hanscom, a pediatric occupational therapist, says of this, quote, we are wreaking havoc on their neurological systems, and they're going to school with bodies less prepared to learn than ever before in history. Our teachers and principals know what children need, but they fear retaliation. When it comes to adding recess time, they are quite literally scared to do what they know is best. School staff members need your support. They need to know the jobs they love so much won't be taken away if they choose to do the right thing. I'm here tonight to stand firm that our children, my babies, need more time outside to be healthy and whole. I emailed you all yesterday with links to resources and research. Please give them your careful consideration. I beg you to reach out to state lawmakers and start this conversation at the state level. Remind yourselves and state representatives that this change is free. It will cost us nothing, and over time will save us money. I look forward to working together over the coming weeks and months to make this a lasting change in Greenville County Schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patton. Our next speaker is Jennifer Hausman.
To the Greenville County School Board, this is my first time speaking here tonight. I have a daughter in 8th grade who's getting bullied since elementary school until now. The worst has been middle school. In 6th grade, she's had her nose broken, not once, but twice. She's had balls thrown at her face. She went to the doctor after the second time. He confirmed it was broken. So I went back to the school and talked with the assistant principal. She asked why we didn't say anything earlier, and my daughter's response was, I didn't want to be a tattletale. She has been bullied on TikTok. There has been 2 pages that have been started. She is a horse, a hate page, sorry not sorry. She is my idol. Queen hasn't noticed, frown face, IBF, see translation. The worst thing ever was a recorded call taken by my daughter. It happened September 26th at 1:02 a.m. I can't stand ugly people. Bro, honestly can't stand ugly people. My daughter was told to leave because she was ugly. She is a fat, obese. I hope your family dies in a car accident. I hope you have to witness the aftermath. I hope you get a phone call that your family was brutally murdered in a car crash. Not even that. I hope you find out on the news just like everybody else. You don't even deserve that. I hope you would wind up alone. You're an ugly fat person that nobody wants. Who says that to my daughter? My daughter's name and phone number have been released on Instagram. I'm here to tell you, the board, you have failed my daughter. You've made her education unsafe by doing nothing to stop the bullying. It needs to stop now. If it doesn't stop, I have no problem to release all this to the sheriff. To my brave, beautiful daughter, you have taught me to be brave. These kids who have been bullying her will be held accountable. All these kids have been doing is teaching these kids to hate my daughter. It's not okay. I will fight for you. I will never give up. I will never back down. I won't stay silent anymore. To a special group of people have taught me that there is hope, faith, and love and light. We are fighting for our children. Our light is strong here in South Carolina. I will find a way to stop this bullying because this mom is tired of the bullying. We are fighting and mad in South Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Houseman. Our next speaker is Judith Tenzola.
After we moved to the plains of Minnesota, driving through town, I saw something ahead I had never seen before. Sliding and scampering in its ominous natural beauty was tumbleweed. Tumbleweed! I had never seen it except in old cowboy movies, and I always thought it was the imagination of a set designer. However, sadly, like tumbleweed, our future freedoms are ominous and seem to be sliding and scampering away, but without the natural beauty of that tumbleweed. Whether you acknowledge it or not, understand it or rebuke it, it therefore are forces who want to control us and our children. You can do something about it. Because you are one of only 7,000 elected officials in the entire country. Are you aware that some employed by this district in top positions ignore the queries of taxpayers? I know it's true, because mine have been ignored. Is common courtesy now as useless as a pair of waders in the desert? Is it part of your duties to tell those that run the school to make sure common courtesy is applied to parents and taxpayers when they ask them something? They might not like what we ask or comment on, but that's our right to do so. Everyone deserves a speedy reply. Even Alka-Seltzer gives them that. Are you proud of the publishers chosen to supply books that you see in our schools? I was told that publishers send in large quantities of books that aren't identified by their genre. It seems to me, if they were told we were no longer purchasing their books unless subject matter was labeled, they'd be adding that information before a hot kernel could pop. Deny it you may, but accept it you must. These books in our schools are indicative of the loss of control parents see and feel. And that is why last month I asked that SORA app be made public to both parents and taxpayers. At 151 today, I was told that can't happen because it is an app that can't be viewed by parents. And like that tumbleweed I saw, which I will never see again, perhaps the evil we see now, trying to bore and pierce into our republic, will never be seen again. Now do the right thing.
Thank you, Ms. Tenzola. Next speaker is Suzanne Pickens.
Thank y'all for being here and giving us an opportunity to speak. Where's the data? It's a really simple question and one that I'm shocked nearly 2 years later has still not been asked. Last week, my sister-in-law took my 3-year-old niece to Greenview Elementary, where she's part of an amazing program at their Child Development Center. And when she was dropping Holland off, she was told that there had been a classroom exposure. And because of Holland's special needs and unique developmental challenges, she's not able to keep a mask on during the day. So she was forced to spend all last week at home. Were y'all aware that a child with special needs was kept out of the classroom last week because she's unable to stay masked? I know you know the importance of consistency and structure to most kids, but particularly those with unique developmental or learning challenges. There's been no data or evidence to support why masks are necessary or efficient at slowing the spread of this virus, not on DHEC's website, not in their exclusion policy or their school guidelines, also not on the links that they provide to the CDC website. And I just find it really incredible that DHEC is able to write guidelines like masking after an exposure without providing one shred of evidence to explain their benefit or to show that a benefit can be gained. And the only reason I can think is that governing bodies or agencies who are impacted by their guidelines, like Greenville County Schools, are not demanding that they provide that data. I mean, common sense, I feel like, says or can tell you that masking or keeping kids' faces covered all day could have a negative impact socially and emotionally, but also educationally for ESL students, those with hearing or speech challenges, and early learners especially. So respectfully, the "it's just" argument really has run its course. It wasn't just a week out of school for Holland. It's not just 10 days for an exposure after an exposure for kids who are impeded by the barrier of a face covering for hours on end in a classroom. It's not just, period, but certainly not without having to provide data and evidence to back up what they're requiring y'all to enforce. I hear that DHEC has announced some new guidance, so I consider not speaking tonight, but please let's not do this to kids again. Greenville County, being the biggest district in the state, has a massive impact, as y'all know, and when guidance comes down, because I'm certain it probably will, this is not the last time, let's not just accept it without demanding that evidence and data is given and supported to show the benefits, so that we can weigh the cost versus risk. So please let's not do that again, because after 2 years of disruption and children being sent home from school punished, really, that's what happened with my niece. For her unique challenges, because DHEC said so, is not enough. I hear also on the agenda that there is spending in the budget for more masks, maybe $75,000. I'd like to see how we could use that money for other purposes.
Thank you, Ms. Pickens. Next speaker is Alicia Brewster.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Alicia Brewster, and I'm a former Greenville County Schools teacher, and I'm also the mother of a Greenville County School District graduate and 2 children who are currently in our schools. My youngest is with me today. She's a 7th grader at Charles Towns Center, as she corrected me today to say. And we feel very fortunate because she has access to tailored learning experiences offered at Sterling's Charlestown Center that we know is just the best that she could ever receive. And we feel blessed to live in a community where there are so many numerous and varied opportunities for students. I also serve on the School Improvement Council for Tanglewood Middle School, where I have volunteered for the past 4 or 5 years. I was honored to be invited by the former principal, who's actually here today, Dr. Edward Anderson, and continue to serve there with the current principal, Dr. Wales. Tanglewood's test scores and student engagement has steadily improved because of the intentional care of the current and our previous administrator, faculty, and staff. So I think that we have so much to be proud of and so much to look forward to at Tanglewood Middle School. So while I live in Simpsonville and do not have a child at Tanglewood, I started serving there because I saw the economic and racial disparities that contribute to historically poor educational outcomes for that school. My heart aches when anyone's child fails through the cracks or falls through the cracks, especially when communities across the country have studied these issues for decades, and we know what works. As a Black mother, I am also keenly aware of the opportunity and achievement gaps suffered by Black and low-wealth communities, families across our district, and that are further exacerbated by the pandemic and other economic pressures. We are at a crossroads, and I believe that the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, the ESSER funds, will help Greenville begin to address the students' social, emotional, mental health, and academic needs resulting from the pandemic. More specifically, the activities and interventions should address the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on underrepresented student subgroups, including African Americans and low-income families, children with disabilities, English learners, and the growing number of students experiencing homelessness in our school district. Our district has a critical role to play in marshaling funding into sustainable programs and activities that will improve the conditions for all of our students and lead to more equitable outcomes for Black students, for low wealth students, and other groups that have historically fallen through the cracks. I hope that we will really take a holistic approach, listening to the students, the parents, the faculty, and the communities who have been most impacted by the pandemic and historical inequities.
Thank you, Ms. Brewster.
Historically not had a seat at the table.
Thank you, Ms. Brewster. Thank you. Next speaker is Edward Anderson.
Good evening. My name is Edward Anderson. I am the Executive Director for Track Greenville. I am former principal of Greenville County Schools. I'm a father of a Greenville County student and husband of a Greenville County teacher, and former graduate of a Greenville County school. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about Track Greenville. So Track Greenville is a school-based community collaboration to align and leverage community interventions and resources to keep students on track towards high school graduation and post-secondary success. We believe everyone deserves access to quality education and the opportunity to reach their full potential. Education is our most robust predictor of financial stability. And with the right supports, education can change the direction of a child's life forever. Students who are struggling often begin disengaging from school during their middle school years. If we intervene in these critical years, we can stop disengagement before it happens and help students stay on track to a bright and productive future. In partnership with Track Greenville, the Greenville County School District, collectively developed the early warning response system. That system is now directly used in all schools to identify students who may be off track academically, behaviorally, and through their course performance, key indicators of student success. Today, Track Greenville engages in deep collaborations with 6 high-poverty Greenville County schools: Berea High, Berea Middle, Carolina High, Greenville Early College, Lakeview Middle, and Tanglewood Middle. This collaboration includes full-time Track facilitators who run those weekly meetings, summer and after-school programming using an evidence-based curriculum called Bell Excel, 1 to 2 full-time communities and school site coordinators who provide school-wide positive school climate strategies, run small groups, and do intensive case management. A family support specialist that organizes school-wide events such as food distribution and resource fairs, in addition to assisting families with rent, utility, and food insecurity. Partnering with respected evaluators to capture best practices and develop recommendations. Partnering with organizations such as Public Education Partners to provide staff appreciation events, continuing education, and other learning opportunities. Annual trainings for our staff and student celebration events. Middle school attendance and course grades, particularly in math and English, are the two single greatest indications of high school graduation and post-secondary success. There is hope. Research has proven that by intervening early through evidence-based interventions, schools and community partners can not only get students back on track, but also help break the cycle of poverty in their lives. Our goal is to keep students on track to an on-time graduation.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Our next speaker is Sarah Merrill.
John 7:7, Jesus is talking to the people, and he tells the people, the world is not going to hate you. They're going to hate me for the evil that I speak about that it's doing. So when we come here as parents to talk about the evil that is being brought on our children, that's kind of given me a little boost in my butt, to a reason to move forward and talk about the evil that our children are experiencing in public schools. So last month we brought to your attention books that are being allowed in the public school libraries. I'd like to talk about the books, the process in which those books are chosen. I was happy to have an in-depth conversation with someone from the school board and was made aware of this process was done by book vendors. Who are the book vendors? Who decides who can be on that team? Is this a part of the SEL team we have in place in Greenville County? I found out that it is not a team effort, but an individual decides if a book goes through or not. That's a very dangerous privilege to have. Why don't we have a standard in place for these books? A standard that sets the precedence for the content in public school books. That way, no one's personal ideals and morals will affect this important process. After talking with multiple teachers, I have learned that they were recently given $3,000 to order new books. $3,000 is a lot to spend on books. It's only books only too, not bookmarks, not shelves, not a space to put the massive books that they're about to take in. It's just all new books. I also learned that since that order, only SEL books have come in. So, and this is coming from multiple teachers, that SEL books have come, but the rest of the genres haven't come in. I find that interesting. Now, this might not be the case in every school, but it is in multiple ones that I'm hearing about. Teachers are forced to pick from genres given to them, and they can't pick individual books. It has to be collections. There's a diversity in SEL collection. That's critical race theory. And remarkably, those only books that came in are the SEL ones. We all know that SEL is an extension of CRT. Rethink Ed is our curriculum that we're using. It's from a liberal organization in New York. Who decided that we use this curriculum? And why are we using a curriculum that doesn't have our morals and foundations here in the South? So, books like Lawn Boy, George, Drama, Love Z, those are ones that have subtle hints of LGBTQ and transgender ideology. You can look these up. George is about a 4th grade transgender kid. Why is that in a public school book for children? Shouldn't it be education? Shouldn't it be things that they're learning, math and arithmetic and writing? Those are way more important. I'd like to know who specifically promotes these ideas to our students. Is it the board? Is it superintendent? Is it the federal government pandemic money that was received? Is it your SEL team? We are conservative county, and these are our children. We have a right to say no and to keep liberal ideas out of our schools and continue to educate our children.
Thank you, Ms. Merrill. That completes the visitors tonight. The next item on the agenda is Superintendent's report. Dr. Oyster.
Mick, I don't have a formal report tonight, so if we could return to the action items.
We can do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is action items 5.01. Let me get it pulled up here. The recommended motion coming from the Committee of the Whole does not need a second, is to approve the local board courses as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 5.02. The recommended motion coming from the Committee of the Whole does not need a second, is to approve the ESSER 3 expenditures as presented, which are included in the ESSER funding expenditure plan preliminarily approved by the State Department of Education. Any discussion? Ms. Ventus-Wells.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Royster, can you explain, I know in this budget, it does have, I'm trying to find it right here. Let me see where it is. Okay, where it has mental health services, it's got the social emotional curriculum, Rethink Ed. Can you tell me how that originated? I mean, when did we actually start thinking about SEL?
I believe that, if I recall correctly, that term originated in the strategic planning process. So that would have been 5 years ago, because we're now on year 4 of a 5-year plan. And the plan is done the year prior to its implementation. So it came about through meetings in the community, feedback from parents, students, faculty members. There were several thousand people that were involved in providing feedback in the strategic planning process. That's one aspect of approaching mental health for our students. We've had mental health services in our schools since 1993. We greatly expanded them over the years. The services are conducted by Greenville Mental Health, which is a branch, is not the right term, but it's the local provider for the State Department of Mental Health. So in addition to the school counselors that we have in each school, we have mental health counselors assigned on an acuity basis. So it's part of an overall package, and social emotional learning having to do with things like decision making and making good choices, what to do when confronted with problems or challenges. Those things that one would think about as making an individual stronger, more able to face emotional adversity. You may recall, in fact I'm sure you will, that this board has committed significant resources in the past. Number one, to significantly increase the number of guidance counselors, school counselors in the schools, and at the same time decreasing the load for each of those counselors, the student load, down to what's recommended at the national level. I believe that's 251 at the secondary level. So it's just another step in an ongoing, if you look back to the first mental health counselors, a 30-year effort to improve the mental health of our students. There was, and you may have attended that, I think there was a session conducted at the State School Boards Conference this past weekend that I believe Ms. Wells and Ms. Fitzer from our office and Ellen Hampshire from academics conducted. I don't know if maybe Ms. Wells wants to speak. I'm not sure the protocol on that for me calling on a board member to do that. I assume that would be to refer that to you.
Does she need to speak on it?
I know she might want to.
Do you want to speak on it?
Since she gave that presentation.
I certainly would be happy to. I think one thing that, because we only had a few board members that were at the conference, we did print some copies of the presentation that we did for the board members so you would know what we presented. But the idea was to present on our journey, which to your point, Dr. Royster, the school district started a journey for social emotional learning in 1993 with that first mental health counselor in one school. But this board, going back to 2013, when we first asked for a presentation on guidance counselors and how they were supporting our students, sort of embarked on a journey and set a priority that we thought our students needed more support outside the academic classroom. And so that started with asking, what are guidance counselors doing with their time? What does their schedule look like? How many students are they responsible for? Started there, and then I think every year since then, there's been a priority to add individual graduation plan software that would give kind of eliminate some issues, some workload for those guidance counselors so that they could have more time available. I think when we recognized that some of the issues with anxiety and the breakdowns that our students were having in school really weren't, our guidance counselors weren't really equipped
to help with some of those things. That's when that push for mental health counselors, to get more mental health counselors in school, took place. I'm appreciative that the community, people in the community, worked with the administration over the years. You know, On Track's a good example of kind of taking a problem that we see that's impeding student success and doing something about it. You know, putting our action in the places where it matters most, which is in that. So I know that there's concern that the curriculum we are using for social and emotional learning has some parts in it that are troubling to some people. And I think that's why, I'll be happy to share this presentation with anyone that would like to see it. If you look at the way our board has set up going about this journey to social emotional supports for student success, it comes with a monitoring and evaluation. And if the curriculum, the administration already is looking at that curriculum. So if this curriculum doesn't meet the standard we want it to meet in our community, then we'll change it. Because the point's not we're trying to teach a curriculum or we're trying to make some publication fat and happy and rich. We're not. We're looking for ways to support our students and move them forward. So this budget, this ESSER funding budget, doesn't look any different than what our priorities have been for students for many years. It's a lot more needed now because so many kids have broken down because of COVID. And goodness gracious, I'm glad we've spent the last several years adding to those supports so we could have that. So, you know, I know that the Rethink Ed curriculum is there at $275,000. And, you know, what I would say is, I heard the administration say 2 weeks ago that they were already in process of evaluating the curriculum we're using. Is it effective? Is it doing for the kids what we need it to do? Which what we need them to do is to come to school every day, able to learn, to have their mind in a place where they can learn and accept knowledge, learning how to read, write, do math, knowing how to navigate their choices. So I would say that I know that this administration is going to take this budget and move it forward with social emotional supports to that end. So I guess I would ask, what I believe is the case from what I remember 2 weeks ago is the social emotional curriculum that we have slated for Rethink Ed, if the administration in its evaluations decided that this is not the right curriculum and we need to use something different, that money isn't automatically earmarked specifically for that curriculum, and that would be something that would be adjusted. Am I correct in that?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. So, sorry, that was a little bit longer, Mr. Meek.
Ms. LaVenta as well.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So when I saw this on the ESSER funding, I want to make sure, because I think some people are doing better with the social emotional curriculum than others. And maybe it's because they don't feel comfortable teaching that curriculum because that's not their expertise. And because of that, I think it's important that we evaluate that program like you said we were going to do. I'm seeing that maybe I've spoken to a lot of elementary school teachers that say they just don't have time to teach SEL because they've got so much they have to cover. And I want them to cover reading, writing, arithmetic. I want them to educate our children. If they don't have that time, I don't want them to just make up something. I'd rather them not do it than do it in a different way, if that makes any sense. And then in the older areas, I just would love, knowing the history that this went back years ago, and that you had thousands. How many people did you say you had? Maybe, what?
There were several thousand involved in the strategic planning process. Yeah. You may recall we sent out multiple surveys.
Right.
We had a series of community meetings all over the county. We can get you those exact numbers. That's been about 5 or 6 years ago. More than 4,000.
And then when I hear that a young student is experiencing bullying, then I want to know why this mental health counselor hasn't stepped in and assisted this family. It really breaks my heart to know that a child is going through this, the family is going through this. They're getting these calls at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I don't know. All I'm hearing is what happened in 3 minutes is really.
Right, and as you know, the administration assigns someone to follow up with people who bring forth issues like that.
Yes, sir.
And in fact, Dr. Skipper's already had a conversation with that parent.
Well, good, and I appreciate that. But if these mental health, and Dr. Royster, I know that the mental health workers that you get, they're from where?
Department of Mental Health.
And our counselors usually get paid more than the mental health workers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so, so our guidance counselors make a higher salary than mental health. It's a state agency. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Because of the ESSER funding and in the many areas that money is allocated are great, I'm going to vote yes on this because you're going to reevaluate SEL. And if it needs tweaking and whatever, to make sure that we are reaching students properly and that we're not adding our own take on the curriculum, then I'm good with that. And I'm sure that we're going to do a phenomenal job evaluating that program and decide what needs to come out or what needs to stay or what needs to be added. So I thank you, Dr. Royster,
yes, ma'am,
for your explanation.
Ms. Doolin.
I'm a little bit torn with all of this because there are some things that I'm so excited about, such as outdoor seating at the cafeteria that could be used for outdoor classroom, which I looked and I asked for on March 4th last year. I'm so glad it's finally coming up. But I don't feel like it's totally responsible to approve $1.3 million for contact tracing over the next 3 years because I just don't think we're going to need it. And I know that even if we approve it, we don't have to spend it, but I would rather we come back together and approve it at a later date if it actually is needed rather than just saying, let's spend $300,000 on PPE. But no one's arguing. The nurse's office might need some supplies, but I'm just having a hard time approving that much money for things that we don't know if we're going to need in 2023 or 2024.
Well, and we would not spend that if we didn't need it and weren't required to do it. And if we were to rebudget it, we would come back to you to rebudget those funds.
Yes, when would we get back together if it was rebudgeted?
Well, whatever fiscal year that it indicates we would spend it, we'd make a decision during that fiscal year. Do we need that or do we not need it? Carry that forward or reduce it by some amount. But we're not going to go out and buy anything that we don't absolutely have to have. We're not going to buy PPE or anything else if we don't need it. It'd be a waste of money. We're not going to do that.
I agree. I think it would be a waste of money. So that's where I am. Some things, like on track, I'm so happy that you came to speak to us. That money is in here. I mean, I want to approve that, but I'm still having a hard time with some of the other line items.
And as you recall, it's a plan submitted in its whole and entirety to the state, and they would approve it, but we can amend it in the future. So if we don't use that, it's no problem to amend it. And while that's a lot of money, it is not a very large amount inside of $162 million. But again, we're not going to spend it if we don't need to have to spend it.
Yes, I understand. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Anyone else have any questions, comments? Mr. Sudduth.
Dr. Royster, we are looking at $162 million. We've already approved spending $57 million.
Yes, sir, you have done so.
I have a plan to spend for the next 3 years.
Yes, sir, we're required to expend it by FY '24.
The question I have, I was concerned about, we said we were looking for input
Yes, sir.
from the public,
Yes, sir.
and when do we start with that?
In April 2021, we received notice of the ESSER 3 allocation. In July of 21, we presented to the public an opportunity to provide input, and we obtained that up until and through August of 21. And at that time, we also picked up input from principals and directors who commented on the public input we'd received. And you'll see there, to ensure responses from our diverse community, we publicized a survey through our website, social media channels. It went to Parent Backpack, which goes to every parent that signs up for Backpack in the district, and local media. We additionally sent the links for both English and Spanish surveys to community partners, including Family Connection, Able SC, Thrive Upstate, Greenville Can, Vocational Rehabilitation, Project Search, Public Education Partners, the Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Alliance, the Department of Social Services, NAACP, the United Way, the Homeless Alliance, the Greenville County Redevelopment Authority, and the Urban League. And we even requested an extension of the deadline from the state to submit our plan in order to have more time to receive public input.
Yes, I've seen all those that you've spoken about.
Yes, sir.
And my question was, how much of an input did we get from each one of these, in your opinion? I'm not looking for a listing of each organization.
We had some of those organizations that responded in full and promptly, and others that provided very little input. And we had probably about an average input from parents as a result of Backpack announcements.
Who gave us the most input? Was that
the stack? Can you quantify that? Who gave the most input?
It was a combination between what we received from parents and the principals.
I was wondering about these community organizations. I would hope that they would have given us ample.
Some did. The organizations.
We're often criticized because we don't say that, well, I didn't know you was going to have this or do this, whatever.
We made considerable effort to make sure people were appropriately informed so they had the opportunity to respond. Now, whether they did or they didn't, at some point, the responsibility of that lies to those organizations.
I thought we gave these people opportunity. I hope they took advantage of it.
And some did, Mr. Soto, some did.
I've got, and I'm sure you've answered this before, but explain to me one more time. We say that for indirect costs, we're going to spend $20 million. Explain for me exactly what these indirect costs are.
Indirect cost is an allowable expense to cover the overhead of handling the funds. We have indirect cost on every federal program. The indirect cost percentage on the ESSER funds is higher than any other federal program we have. We have a few people employed temporarily through the life of this grant to track the expense and to track the rules and regulations to make sure we're spending it in accord with the requirements. When this is over in FY '24, those positions will go away. The bulk of that $20,243,298 is going to roll to your fund balance, which will place it in a category that has no restriction on its expenditure.
In those 3 years, what we don't spend in that year, does it carry over to the next year?
Yes, sir. It can carry over through FY '24. By FY '24, it must all be spent.
If we don't spend it, we lose it.
If you don't spend it, you lose it. But there are items that are already in our budget that are allowable expenses that we can journal entry these funds to, which then creates an equal amount that will go to your fund balance, which allows you to spend it without restriction.
So that is the overhead cost we're talking about specifically.
Yes, sir, indirect cost, that formula exists to cover overhead.
Okay.
And that's way more than we will need for that purpose, so it will, the vast majority of that will go directly to your fund balance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Suddeth. Mr. Lewis.
Dr. Royster, thanks for this presentation. So just following up on the question about the 1.3 million. So knowing that we currently don't need to do a level of this tracing and knowing that a lot of that PPE may not be needed, it sounds like these dollars are pretty much being put on hold for a time when we might need them. Is it possible, could we reclassify that 1.3 million as a pending line in the budget so that the board is approving all the expenditures except for this 1.3 million? We designate it for this purpose, but we don't allocate it to that purpose until the board gives it a second approval. I'm just trying to think of a way to be more formal.
I think that makes it a little more cumbersome, but I can tell you, we won't spend it without notifying you we need to spend that, and here's why we need to spend it. And that would be because we're having to comply with DEAT requirements again.
So the money that's been, some of those dollars have been allocated for FY22.
It kicked forward to 23 or 24.
So you have no intention of spending the dollars that are allocated for contract tracing, PPE, and that are allocated for FY22 in FY22?
Not at this point, no, sir.
And so those dollars would just move forward to FY23, and the board would then approve that separately, or?
It would just move forward unless we wanted to ask you to spend it on something else, which might come at any point in the 3-year period.
What would happen if we just took it out of the budget? I mean, you're sending a plan to the state that's
I think
1.3 million
you
short.
need to put it somewhere, and I mean, I guess I'm not seeing an issue with it just staying where it is, and we're not going to spend it unless we have to spend it. And we'll come back to you before we would allocate it to any other purpose.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Any other questions? Ms. Wales?
Just to follow along with, make sure I follow along with how we're saying we're going to sort of manage this from a board perspective. So each one of these categories is going to have its own line item that you're charging to, and we did talk last time about some of this money we've spent already, and we'll journal entry as soon as we're able to get access to the funds, right? But what I hear you saying is, so we're going to have a line item for mental health services, for virtual program, for substitutes, and those line items are going to, the budget we're assigning is going to be the budget number, and won't change or move. We'll get the reports on it just like we get on every other fund, right? So we'll get a monthly report.
Well, for example, in that mental health services, you might have sub-accounts in it, contracted services, purchase services, software, but it would be under that broad account category.
So every month we get reports on each one of the funds. This would be one of the ones that we would have a report on the fund, or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
This is a little bit unusual. Like, we don't normally report every month like on Title I or IDEA, but this is unusual both in its amount and its nature. So we can send a report monthly.
Or quarterly, I guess, just to that point. And then, again, the recognition is this is a line item, and things aren't going to move between those line items in the broader fund without that coming back to the board.
Right.
Right, okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wales. Ms. LaVentus Wales. Ms. LaVentus.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Royster, of that 1.7 million that went to contact tracing, what is?
Put your mic on.
I'm sorry. That 1.7 million that went to contact tracing, how was that actually spent? Was that spent on monitoring, or what is that actually being spent on?
You're talking about the total amount over the 3-year period.
From when we started.
It's spent the way we're spending it now, which is, as we've had to contact trace, we have to have people to provide the tracking of all our employees. So somebody turns in a form, they had an exposure. They get a direction about here's what you're supposed to do. Here's what you have to do in accord with the DHEC requirements. So we've had as many, when we went through that Omicron surge, we had as many as 5 people, I think it was, Phil, 5 on the employee side.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Doing all that tracking. Well, they all, except one, had a full-time job. So they're getting paid to do this after hours. One was a retired principal that we paid to work during the day. One person did some of the work during the day. When we had to deal with the students, we provided extra compensation at every school so that they could pay someone to handle the tracking that was required for their students in quarantine and isolation, so somebody in the school didn't have to take that on as part of their regular day job, because they got a full-time job during the day. And they were allowed, depending on the size of the school, a minimum of 15 hours a week of extra time. And the more students you had, the greater the allocation was. And it had to be used to provide the handling of that information and all of that tracking. So it's a people intensive, and at one time we were paying more than 20 people at the district level to collect all the district data and give the information back, and multiple people at every school in the district to do the tracking. So they did not have to do it during the regular workday and their job go undone, because that had to be done as a DHEC requirement. And as the surge has dropped, the expenditure for that will drop. Like right now, we have, I believe, 11 employees out on COVID. Well, one person doing that as part of their regular job can handle that.
Okay, and so with that being said, now that, okay, so I'm so confused with DHEC's up and down on their rules and regulations when they depended on us for data to make decisions that they made without having any data. But anyway, with that being said, Dr. Royster, are we at a point now where this contact tracing has ceased? Because we need to let kids be kids.
As of March the 1st, looking back 2 weeks, any school, not the district, any school within the district that has less than 10% positive, you do not have to quarantine or contact trace, and you have to get that number each day. And as long as it stays below 10%, you don't have to do any quarantining, you don't have to do any contact tracing. Now, should we have another surge come through, like this Omicron surge, they've already made it clear you'll have to return to that. So you've got to have the ability to respond to that if you need to. And hopefully that won't occur. We don't want to spend the money on that. It'd be better to be able to spend that on more career and technical education equipment or something else. So we're not going to spend any, just like that PPE or mask or whatever else, we're not going to spend anything on this that we don't have to spend on it.
Well, I'm glad.
But we also don't want to put any more burden on our employees that are already burdened enough.
I don't want to put any more burden on our students that have had to deal with all of this.
Certainly not either.
Up and down stuff.
But again, we're doing what we are required and compelled to do.
Yes, sir.
It's not a matter of choice.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. LaVenta, as well as Ms. Doolin.
Thank you. I have one other question about the mental health services over the next 3 years. It looks like every year the amount is doubled, or add 300,000 for 2022, 600,000 for 2023, and 900,000 for 2024.
It's a gradual increase, and we're. I think I mentioned that to the board, maybe the committee of the whole. I did have a conversation with the person that's been tasked with reviewing the mental health services at the state level, and talked with them about some of our concerns about cost and providing mental health services for students that don't qualify for Medicaid and some things like that. I would hope that perhaps that might not have to be used, or if that doesn't turn out the way we want it to, we may need to look for additional resources to be able to continue to provide those services.
Well, I really wondered why we weren't going with 900,000 for the first year and then tapering, hoping that the state would kick in more money. Because if we have this huge bank of money, is it that we don't have enough we can't find enough therapists or counselors to hire?
Well, no, we don't hire them, mental health does, but they are struggling to hire them. So in FY '22, we have $300,000 in there. In FY '23, we have $600,000, and in FY '24, we have $900,000. So it's increasing each year, and I thought I heard you to say it was decreasing each year.
I wonder why we're not going big in the beginning. And then,
Because we're already putting some funds from Mr. McCoy's budget in mental health services now.
do you know how much that is?
He's out of state tonight, so Dr. McDavid, do you remember the amount?
Was it 300,000 in the budget?
$300,000 from Title IV.
300,000.
And we still have Title IV. Title IV is not a stable federal fund that we can rely on over time.
So this would be an additional 300,000, or would replace?
At this point, it may be all that 300,000, or it may be a part of it.
Okay.
Again, if they can't find enough mental health counselors, we don't have the services to pay for. So some of that's dependent on their ability to find people. And as Ms. Levinas Wells mentioned earlier, their pay scale makes it difficult for them to find mental health counselors.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Dylan, we have a motion on the floor. Any further?
One last question.
One last question.
One last question. If we're cutting back on contact tracing, how will we know when we get to 10%?
That's based on people who test positive. It has nothing to do with contact tracing.
So they have to test
it's
positive.
Less than 10% testing positive.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Next, we got a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is 5.03. The recommended motion for committee of the whole does not need a second. Is to assign $13,213,500 of the general fund balance to fund the non-recurring items as presented. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Ms. Wells.
One question on I'm really happy with the priorities we have in our fund balance. So I will say that. So I appreciate the work of the people in the room and bringing that forward. On the new elementary school construction, I remember we briefly talked about that. You escalated that. Have we added additional cushion? Because I think we know construction costs are continuing to escalate. So do we feel like we've got some cushion in there with the money that we're transferring from fund balance?
Yes, ma'am, I think so. We added in items that were causing the increase due to site arrangements and what SCDOT, was requiring us to do, and then we added 10% on top of that.
Okay, all right.
We're getting real close to showing you a drawing.
Yes, sir.
Which means we're real close to being out on the project.
And were there any other projects in the capital plan that will also need to come to us for additional funding?
Well, this one hadn't been updated since 2017. There are some that you saw in the workshop we did, and there'll be a few more. We're about ready to bring that back to you again, the full long-range facility plan. So there'll be some others in there.
So we've kept enough money in our fund balance that if we need to try to add funding to that, we'll be able to do so once we know more about the cost. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, 6.01, committee liaison reports. We have anyone that wants to make a report tonight? Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Advocacy Committee met today, and just as a reminder, we have a meeting scheduled on April the 25th at noon with the city council members from the Golden Strip area, so Fountain Inn, Simpsonville, and Malden, and that'll be at the Golden Strip Career Center. The purpose is to provide an opportunity for all of those city council members to meet the school board members and to meet one another, because as we talked to them about doing some outreach, we learned that they actually don't get together with one another that often. And so this should provide an opportunity for them to talk about issues that are affecting Malden, Simpsonville, and Fountain Inn, and also give the district an opportunity to talk about how some of the growth patterns in those areas are affecting our schools, and just to help them prepare for future growth plans. And so that'll again be on April the 25th at noon. And all board members are welcome to attend, not just the members of the advocacy committee. There'll be other meetings scheduled for the other municipalities, including Greer and Travelers Rest, once we get those dates set. But it'll be sometime after April 25th.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Anyone else? Hearing none. The next item is 7.01 Monthly Finance Report. I think that's for information, Dr. Royster.
Yes, sir. I don't think Ms. Stack has anything necessarily to bring to your attention. Be able to answer any question you might have.
Do we have any questions? Mr. Sutton.
Dr. Royster,
Yes, sir.
are these metal detectors that we purchased, are they for in school or out of school?
Both.
Did you have, what usually have in school?
Should we suspect that someone has a weapon on them, they use it to conduct an initial search.
That's all I have.
Any further questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. We are adjourned.